Welcome to the third INSO and the Good Ideas Club Innovators Breakfast, now upgraded to a brunch because some people wanted to join and they couldn't make the morning dash. So we're trying it slightly later. And we've actually got less participants on this one. So maybe I'll go back to the morning slot. We'll see. But I'm really pleased to be co-hosting this session today with Habiba Nazim, who's a frequent guest on our Innovators Breakfast. She's the founder of the Barack Infused Career Coaching business, and I'll hand over to Habiba to introduce herself.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you everyone for joining. So my name is Habiba Nazim and I am the founder of BIG. And what I try to do is I do leadership coaching and keynote speaking. So to help entrepreneurs and businesses try to innovate themselves and try to work in a more transformative and transparent way and aligning their values with their delivery. So that's a bit about me. What we've decided today was to take a different approach on how we talk about, obviously this is the Innovations Club, and how we can deliver our work in a different manner. So how I approached this was when we look at responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, that's what we wanted to touch base on. Roles and responsibilities in the sense of what we deliver and in different settings. So for example, if you are owner of a small business, what we would naturally do is have, you would probably do the finances of your business, and you would also do the marketing of your business, as well as packaging or delivering of your business. So what the metaphor that we use here is we would wear different hats for different roles within our business. And it can also be the same for our lives. Sometimes you wear the hat of being a parent or being a colleague or being a friend. So when we're looking at different roles and responsibilities, sometimes we have to put on a different hat in order to deliver that. With today's conversation, we wanted to talk more about masks. And what we wanted to talk about is how in different roles and responsibilities, do we naturally or intentionally or unintentionally wear different masks in order to fit in? And what we thought would be a really good icebreaker is, so if your colleague was to describe you in one word of the way you perform or the way you are, what word would they use that probably would surprise your family or friends? So if you just use chat function and put in a word that describes you, what example I have was my colleagues would probably describe me as a confident person. But when you meet my family and friends, they would let you know that sometimes I do ask for a lot of validations and a lot of meltdowns. So confidence might not be the strength that I perform at home, whereas I would perform it at work. So let's just see this chat function, what we've got. Multitasker. So we've got some really good words here. Alex, you've got a really good word here. Do you want to explain a bit more?
Yeah, so I had to use that one because I couldn't quite say all over the place in one word. But yeah, I'd say I'm working on it, but I'm definitely one of those people that is just like in my head and externally. So it's definitely one that's being worked on at the moment.
Okay. Not serious, Sabine, you put here. Do you want to explain that a bit more?
Well, yeah, that's me. I don't know. Like at home, I feel like my mask is. I completely relax. I'm a big joker. Like I'm constantly joking around, and when I turn up to work, I don't know. Alex has worked with me. Maybe I'm overestimating this, but yeah, I feel like I'm way more serious in work, and I'm
Okay.
like I put on this like professional mask, which I don't know
Okay.
if that's yeah. I guess it's the whole point of the conversation. Like, is it a good thing, or should I just be more of the clown than I am at home? I don't know.
So one thing I wanted to talk when I was looking into this conversation was the Greek theology on masking, and how they describe it is when you wear a mask, it's almost as if you're a performer, you're performing. So when we talk about these masks, and let's say your colleague at work, you're a very serious person, but at home, you're very fun. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? How would you describe it if it was to get dig deeper into this?
I'd probably split it into two things, that question. The first is it a mask that you are putting on, or is it a mask that you're conforming to in some way? Um, to which, I mean, the easy answer would be, yeah, of course, just be authentic. But I don't think the modern workplace works like that. And, again, as you say, if you're leading teams, if you were authentic, you'd be like, absolutely. I don't know. Sometimes you get nervous. Sometimes things are a bit treacherous, but you do have to put that mask on for the benefit. So I think the question then just becomes is, are you aligned with the ultimate outcome of putting that mask on? But I'd be interested to hear more from you guys.
Yeah, also, Habib, I realize you probably asked Sabir about being not serious. So maybe Sabir can pad out that. Sorry if I hijacked that answer.
No worries, it's fine. Good morning, everyone. I think for me, I think it's both good and bad not being serious all the time. I think it's an easy way for me to kind of move on through life, really, whether it's at home or during work hours. I find to be serious is quite boring, and I think I'm not at that stage of life to be boring. So I feel like if I can be the joker within a group of 2 or 20, I feel like it eases some of the situation or the stuff that's going on around the world. And I feel like by bringing some sort of humor into it, it kind of allows me to just whiz through conversation and be kind of on the better side of most people's good books rather than be someone that they might talk negatively the minute I move away. So I just from a young age, I think I felt like being slightly not so serious just benefited me throughout my kind of friendships and professional relationships rather than be like, oh, Sabir's here, let's pipe it down a little bit, because then you, by your personality, you're making everyone else be a bit fake around you. So I'd rather be the honest one and not be so serious, to bring the personality some others might find restricted in their own personal world or kind of their closed realm. I think so. I've just kind of got on with it, really, and I think I might interrupt some of you guys to say something probably not worthy of saying, but it's just my character to kind of just jump in and say certain things. Well, keeping it professional, of course, but with a bit of humor, I suppose.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I can see what you're getting at, Sabir, in that sense of sometimes it can be exhausting holding on to that mask. Like for example, if I'm always really, really serious, then I like, and then just striking that balance and catching yourself. And yeah, I think it can be a bit exhausting sometimes. And what I personally, when I'm leading a team, is I try to, it's not about being unauthentic or fake, but it's just about what works easy for me. It's for me, it's heavy enough to wear different hats for different roles and responsibilities, especially when you're leading a team or leading an organization. But then to have different kind of personality traits and kind of mask away certain feelings or emotion, to me, that's like too much work. And sometimes, like you were saying, Sabir, it's just easier just to flow through as one person in different setting. Does anybody else have any other opinion on that?
Yeah, I think I do agree with the fact that you do mask certain things away from certain individuals or groups, whether it's at home or your professional terms, whether you're, like you said, you're a leader. Sometimes you have to have your, for lack of a better word, serious mask on, right? If you're leading a team and you've got a serious situation at work, you'd need to have your serious face on. That doesn't mean you take that serious mask to home. So being a parent, you have to balance that act of which mask you're going to have at home. Now, you'd have your truthful mask, in all honesty, at home. Whether you're a mother, you're a father, you'd have that face on. And then when you then go back into the professional world or go into your business, you still have to have some sort of connection back into your original mask. At the same time, have a different set of mask on when you're at 9 to 5, because you can't be fully you, the home you, at work, because there's a lot of things that might not be, whether it's appropriate or whether it's just generally not accepted. And I think that's where the levels of mask comes in. I think you'll have your set mask, and I'm a firm believer of having a specific type, but at the same time, you can take parts of that mask, if that makes sense, into your business or your working life.
I think there's a couple of things here that I like from just listening to the awesome conversation that's ongoing. There's kind of like a hybrid of what Alex said and what you said, Sabir, about it's almost like social mirroring. And yeah, like I don't know quite where I'm going with this. I'm just throwing it out there, but I think there's definitely like a big human element to this where you just try and fit in. And I guess some people are more comfortable with being an outsider than conforming to the norm. Just throwing that out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think I don't think you, as in when I mean you, as in each and every one of us, can fit into a type of group, right? We have to an extent, make up a certain specific mask to fit in at the very least initially, right? So if you go into a group of, workplace where you've never really spoken to certain groups, you might have some sort of background knowledge of what the conversations might go across or the type of people you'll be speaking to. So you'll have that persona that you don't usually have just to fit in initially, to have that first 5 minutes of conversation. And once that's gone in, then you can obviously strip away I would say, the fake mask that you have on to bring out the mask that you generally walk around throughout your life. And I think that's the whole point of different types of mask. Doesn't mean it's wrong or incorrect. It's just having a mask to start off a conversation with certain person or certain groups, to then be able to layer it back to your original mask, which I think it's the fundamental here, is to get back to who you really are, rather than just pretend throughout the whole day. I think it's more hard to pretend throughout the entire day than to just kind of be yourself. I think it's pleasing too many people's X, Y, and Z. I think it's the idea of that, just saying that aloud is exhausting.
Tahira, you have your hand raised. Very
Yes, it
formal.
takes me a while to organize my thoughts. So I was just thinking from what everyone's saying. I think my take on mask is my different set of personalities. So for example, at work, in my previous job, when I went off to a mountain trek trip, that's 20 hours with people I've met for the first time or regulars, and I'm being fun. We're going out for lunch, then we go out for we go out for breakfast. We're on the mountain for hours, then we go out for dinner. Whereas with my family, I'll be like, all right, we've done the event, let's go home. I'll look after the kids. You guys carry on, because I'm seen as a party pooper. But at work, I'm seen as such a fun person. And I think sometimes you get paid to do that little bit of extra, but it's my capability that I can show, rather than it being a mask. It's just me. I think the way I'm seeing it is like a basketball with the stripes. Each angle of my life will get to see that side of my shade. That, I mean, whatever's required of me as well, and whatever's natural to me. But I can kind of combine it, switch through, because my natural element will help with my professional element to engage. And my professional element could help with my, I don't know, my bills and stuff to keep on top of things. So I think it's more of a personality trait, and switching between those traits or intertwining them to get a job done. But as long as you're ethical, but you have to understand. I mean, I think you would feel it if you had to really put on a front, really put on a mask that's to conform, then you'll exhaust yourself. And it's about that recognizing what's a mask, what's a job, what's capability, what's skills. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah. Because I like, yeah, well, what you said there just reminds me of, so Alex and I were on a podcast and we had a guest on the other day who was a West End actor, and we were talking to him about getting into character. And it's almost like what we're describing here is almost like, if like you just said there to her, like forcefully putting on a mask, or like even
Mm.
cherry picking the best, if you're like aware of your different masks, and then have the self-awareness and ability to kind of cherry pick the best moments or the best aspects of each mask to then get that whatever task it is done, like paying your bills. I need my serious task on. It just reminded me of the conversation we had with James about getting into character, because like for me as an innovator and as a curious person, like I'm always like thinking about how these conversations affect our ability to get stuff done or be creative or solve problems. And I think this is kind of like where this conversation emerged out of, because Habiba and I were talking, my wife Aneshka, she's on the call, but I'm not sure if she's able to participate. So, something Habiba said on a previous call about I can't remember what it was, Habiba. It was something like you struggle to get to a coach or a mentor because of some bias or constraint against you that then kind of prompted this whole conversation about, needing to be perceived differently in order to get to where you want to be, which I thought was a really fascinating conversation. And my kind of question that emerged from all of this was, what opportunities have been wasted in the world through someone putting on a mask that was too afraid to say something or do something or be honest or just let themselves go, which I found to be quite a fascinating thought piece.
I remember we were using this analogy. For example, let's say you're designing a rocket and you're struggling with an equation, and that one equation can really guarantee your rocket from flying or combusting. But what is it about us that we sometimes can have this vulnerability to ask for help? So I think that's where it was going with the whole masking thing. It's like when we show up as if I've got this all sorted, I know everything, I'm at a senior position, I'm like CEO, I can't be going around asking that for help to help me kind of figure this out. So is that us holding on to a mask in order not to show vulnerability? Or is it something more deeper, which obviously can become a really massive conversation in the sense of, is it because as a man, I don't want to show I'm vulnerable or I don't want to ask for help, and as a woman, I don't, when I'm in a senior position, I have to show this masculine energy that I've got it covered. I don't need to ask for help. So yeah, I'm just throwing it out there in that sense of what you think.
Probably
To
this
jump
sometimes we go
in,
blind with the mask. If we get lost in our thought process, our work process, if we look too much into ourselves, maybe, I'm not sure. I think I've just lost my chain of thoughts there.
to jump in on that, it's a good point, Habiba, because as humans, we're very good at convincing ourselves that we are doing things that we want to, but in reality, it's actually just a mirage for not doing the hard thing. Because vulnerability, at the end of the day, is hard, and whether that's because of an internal thing or an external thing in the workplace, and the workplace is expecting you to put this mask on, or you're expecting you to put this mask on. Which again is a good point to raise here, because throughout this, we're assuming that we have complete agency on the mask that we put on, when in reality, I'd say majority of the time, the masks that we put on are subconscious, subconscious or induced. And I think it's important to know which ones you're putting on them on, which ones you're putting on, why you're putting them on, and if that's something you really want to do. And I'd like to kind of echo Sabia's point of, if you lead with kind of vulnerability, and if you're kind of casual and funny in the workplace, that in a way is almost taking your mask off and saying like, hey, this is a safe environment, and you can be who you want to be, because I'm leading with vulnerability and I'm leading with kind of comic relief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, so much to unpack there. I think I've actually got some pretty strong opinions on the degree of self-will, or sorry, free will and control we have, but that's a deeper conversation Alex and I tend to have when the microphones are off. But I agree with that wholeheartedly, Alex. I think being aware of our mask is a good first step to being able to at least acknowledge, actually, I'm being forced into a mask that I don't particularly want. Like if you could look at yourself as a fly on the wall, or kind of replay a scenario, how many times would you say, damn, I wish I'd just said what I was honestly thinking, or I wish I'd actually done that and not conformed for whatever reason, subconscious or conscious, that you did. I mean, I think it would be a fascinating experiment if you could, of course, rewind time and put on literally different masks in different scenarios and see how the outcomes would be. And then based on the success of those outcomes, would that then encourage you to maybe even put on a mask that tends to work better for you? I don't know, like if you had the actual total control over what mask you displayed.
I think I would agree from experience. I think what you mentioned about knowing what mask to put, I think the idea of understanding more than one mask that you have, I think is a skill on its own, because I think more often than not, we react from instincts, or subconsciously we're thinking of certain things, right? But I think when you get to a point where you understand, what, I can be like this because I have been like this before. Let me try this route. So I think if you get to a stage where you know what mask you have to put on at a certain time, whether it's a day, week, months, etc. situation. I think it's a massive skill set to have because it allows you to be, I don't want to use the word chameleon, but I think it's one of those where I think you do become a chameleon where you know what mask to use at what situation, whether it's at home or professional or wherever you may be. I think it's a I think it's a great skill to have, and I don't think people appreciate that. It's not you being fake or anything. It's the ability to blend in when necessary and then to show your personality or character wherever you may be. And I think that's a skill that you can create or get to over a span of years rather than instinctively. And I think people don't appreciate the idea of having mask and understanding that you do have certain masks that you can use. And yeah, just to add on, I think it's just a matter of, I think it's a skill set that you don't put on CVs, but it's a skill set that you need to really have to get onto the real world. And that's just how I personally feel from experience. It has been for me anyway.
That was an interesting point about the CV. Like, how would you actually write that in a positive way that didn't seem as if to
There's
say you're
no way to
fake?
write. There's no way in any world, any country that you can put that in a positive manner. But for your sake and sanity, it is a great skill to have, right? Because yeah, like I said, you can't go to an interview and put down list of skills that, oh, I can be this level of fakeness at that point, and I can be this level of fakeness at this point. So, but everyone knows they have it in them. It's just a matter of appreciating that you actually do have it in you to use it for the benefit either for yourself or your surrounding. But yeah, as long as it's done in a positive manner, that's where the positivity of having mask or layer of mask comes in my opinion anyway.
I see we've got a new participant, Shakira. Welcome, Shakira. Thanks for joining, and hopefully you're kind of caught up on the conversation. We're obviously talking about masks and how we turn up in different scenarios and whether we control that, our ability to change masks and things like that. So welcome to the call.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I kind of joined halfway, but I thought just to grasp on what you guys were talking about, I hope I'm kind of in the same discussion mode about it. I would like to actually share my experience with the whole mask, what I think of it. So with the mask, personally, I think at the beginning of my career, I think the kind of mask I put on was from self-doubt. And so because I was new, I was not senior, I had all the seniority around me, I wasn't myself. I was more submitting, impression mode, what can I do? I can do anything you want and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like that was a lot of pressure as well because although at work I'd be like I can do everything, yeah, throw it to me, and I'll be all nice about it, put a smiling face around it, and yeah, of course I can stay late as long as I need to be here and all of that kind of stuff. It's all a mask, really, because then at home I'd be miserable because I spent, that X many amount of hours at work and, often not recognized, not appreciated, and not, rewarded as much. So I think along my career, years later, where I gained a lot more confidence, I was able to take that mask off and I was able to find value in myself and bring that to work because then by that point I knew I was and I valued myself and I was okay being myself at work and I didn't have to be this person that's always yes 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 I can and all of that kind of stuff. It was more that because I valued myself more, I'm going to be myself more and I'm going to be more real. And I'm now confident enough to say no or be like, no, that's a bit too much, or that will have to wait till tomorrow, and it's that communication that got much better, that confidence that they could see they would value me more because I valued myself more because I'm now bringing myself to the table and saying, this is who I am. This is who you employed, and then I think that just makes you feel more at peace with yourself because then you're valuing yourself more. You don't have to put on that mask at work. You don't have to feel pressured that you have to be somebody else at work for the sake of them, not you, and it's not benefiting you. So that's what my interpretation or my experience has been with the mask. But I agree with what Sabir was saying about if you work to use that to your benefit, that's going to be quite interesting, because if you have the capabilities of changing masks to reach different audience, it just becomes that thing where you use it as a skill. Because yes, at work you are with different types of co-workers, you're with people who are far intelligent, you're with people who are not really intelligent but they know how to sell, you're with different types of people at different levels, or different backgrounds, and you kind of need to know how to, sometimes the reality is sometimes with some people you can be yourself, and sometimes with some people you have to hold back a bit. That is the reality of how the world works. So so long as you do it without devaluing yourself or without putting pressure on yourself for not being yourself, then what you're doing is you're doing this mask on and off to your advantage and as a skill, rather than being pressured to do it. So yeah, that's
Um,
my answer.
Yeah, I completely agree, Shakira. And one thing I was going to mention as well, from the point of view of, say, like a manager, whereby you're kind of pressurizing yourself to act in the way that you think they want you to act. And
Yeah.
instead, like, it's also about like the way that the business is run and the culture from up above, whereby the mask that the person above you is putting on can also affect how you react. So if you can see that they're just completely open and they are being themselves entirely, then that would probably make you feel more comfortable to do the same. But then you can get into these
Absolutely.
loops where like managers aren't like that and they do want things in a certain way, which might not actually be their own internal thoughts and ideas, but instead it was like the way that they think they should act. And because of that, you then get pushed into a place where maybe you're not as comfortable to open up and speak to them in a way you'd like to. And so, yeah, that can also be
Yeah,
a
but you
big
feel
impact.
pressured to open
Sure.
up. Yeah, that's so true. That's power of peer pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something interesting, Shakira, you said, and I think I personally feel is it we obviously, I never actually thought of having a mask as a skill, but I always saw of is having a mask is a confidence thing. It's because I'm not self-confident right now, so now I'm gonna just put on a mask and just fit in, just so that I don't get judged, just so that I fit in.
I think it
And then
depends on, sorry, go on.
Go on.
No, just thinking of, depends on your role. I mean, you can have I've worked with a manager who was very friendly, who wanted to be part of the group, but sometimes we needed the manager to be a manager. And I think at some point that got lost. So then the manager was just floating around us, and we're like, damn it, why doesn't he go? We want to do lunch and talk about the manager. But because the manager crossed over and he's not wearing his mask anymore and he's so relaxed, we started to not appreciate the operation of the office. Now we're all a mess now because the manager's out for lunch with us for 1 hour, hour and a half. We're trying to sneak out for that extra hour, or maybe we're too relaxed. We're like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow, Mr. Manager or Miss Manager. We're getting too relaxed and the operation's just falling apart. Then you've got, I mean, sometimes I think the team needs those certain masks, or just like the job roles, the duties, that kind of mask. That's
It's like
how
a
I'm thinking.
structure, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
we need structure
structure.
and a
Yeah.
hierarchy to get stuff done. And I think the context and the environment we find ourselves in and the kind of urgency of tasks requires different structures, right? So sometimes when you've got more time, maybe a manager and a leader can be a little bit more laissez-faire and relaxed. But if they've got to get something done and you need to coordinate multiple teams to achieve something, well, you just need someone to just kind of put on their serious mask and
Yeah,
go.
they need to come in with the mask and talk work.
But yeah, Habiba, I'd be really sorry. I'm going to pick on you a little bit here. So, you mentioned before about recently being on TV for the first time, and for you, that was a completely new environment. And you say you're not self-confident, but it takes a huge degree of confidence to even put yourself in that spotlight. So, I just wonder, like, what mask did you have to wear, or did you feel like you had to put on a mask when you were behind the camera for the first time? And then did you feel like I don't know if you've seen it back yet, but do you recognize yourself when you're looking at yourself on TV? And I'd just like to unpack that a little bit more. And feel free to fire it back at me as well and put me on the spot. Sorry.
Do you know what? It was so funny. I was telling my sister that I couldn't watch the video until 2 days later because I was an absolute wreck just before the cameras went on. I was so nervous. I literally felt sick to my stomach, and it was like oh my God, people are going to judge me. I'm not going to be able to explain it properly. I'm going to get tongue-tied with what I'm trying to say, and I'm just going to look silly. And it was a lot. And then, yes, 100% at that very moment, I had to put on this front. And it was the longest 30 minutes of my life. It was literally like a roller coaster ride. You know, when you get to the queue and the roller coaster, you're so excited, so geared up. And just when you're about to get on the ride, you're like, oh my God, what have I done? I can't even get out of this queue because there's a long queue behind me. So it was nerve-wracking. It was nervous, but I think again, it comes to, you know, how Tahira was explaining about you need the manager to be a manager. You need them to do their job. And I think at that stage on that couch, I felt like as if I have to right now just
We're getting feedback from someone.
yeah. I think what it was at that point, I had to just put on this take responsibility and like hold myself together and just deliver. So I think that pressure that I put on myself, and I guess that's what makes sense of when you were talking about peer pressures, to kind of put on the mask and deliver. And I think that's where it came from. But yeah, it was the longest 13 minutes of my life, definitely.
Nice. Well, I see we've got a couple more people join the call. We've got Cameron and sorry, let me check. I think we've got Mushtaq. Is that pronounced correctly? Well, welcome to the call, guys. We're just talking about
And Dan,
masks
I've got
and
a question for
leadership
you as
and
well when you're free.
yeah.
So I think you opened the door a little when you said I might get the similar question. I think from me to you is how have you obviously been over the years? I'm not sure how long you've been in this doing what you're doing, but how are you as a host and how are you as a participant of a show? Do you feel like you tend to be which mask or which mask do you have? Is it something different, the same one that you've had over the years? How have you been?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm fairly new to the podcasting game. Actually, it was Alex who dragged me into that. It was Alex's idea for the business that we launched a podcast. And if you could hear maybe we'll release it one day, Alex, but we recorded our first practice because neither of us had really done any work behind a microphone and we didn't have the cameras on. So it was only at least our audio. And we sat at my house and we just, spoke about a conversation. We just recorded a conversation. And even just psychologically knowing that the mic was on, I couldn't string a sentence together, which was really, really odd for me. And it took us, even that hour session just completely fell apart. And we actually had our first podcast guest lined up in person. So there was like, we had to just jump in at the deep end. And a bit like what Habiba said, you just had to put a game face on when it mattered. And that first episode actually went really well. When it was a real conversation, you almost forget the mic was on. And then I felt like I became myself very quickly. And I'm a big believer in if you do something 3 times, it starts to form a pattern and a muscle memory in your body, and you'll then become more comfortable. And I guess your masks and your layers then start to erode as your comfort level in any given situation increases. And so I bet if Habiba was on TV 3 times, she'd start to be the more authentic Habiba that she recognizes. And I certainly felt that on a podcast. And when I sat on the as a guest on a recent podcast, the person who was recording me, it was only his ever second episode. So I just kind of said, look, from what I've learned, it's much easier to be a podcast host when the guest is conversational. So just as a heads up, I'm going to be throwing some questions back at you because I think it will make your life a lot easier. And we actually had a really good conversation. And afterwards, he said he forgot that the mic was on. So yeah, I think there's something here like linked to the masks. I think masks are inevitable when you're nervous, and they do fade away and get stripped away once your comfort levels increase in a situation, which I guess is just the definition of muscle memory, right? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does because
Feel
obviously
free
you
to
did.
dig deeper.
No, I think it does. I think yeah, because you did mention the fact that you were a specific way on podcast one to how you were
Super
on
nervous.
podcast three, right? So
Horrible.
again, and this is a skill that you grasped at the time, but it was kind of second nature, right? Or you're nervous at the beginning,
Mm.
and then as you've gone on with experience, you've become how you were prior to the first podcast. So essentially, you bring your lifestyle, your personality back into podcast 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I think that's where what I mentioned earlier on was, I think, to create a skill set of mask, it's a skill set not just in broader terms, like you have a mask for one thing and another thing. I think it's a matter of being able to use a specific type of mask that you've built over the years for a specific situation. So I think if you were to say go into another podcast with someone, let's say that usually has 2-3 million views, right? As an example, you'd be a lot more, I'd say, not nervous, but like you'd be wondering, oh, I need to be quite good because 2-3 million will be seen. So you'll use the mask of, okay, I've got the experience of doing podcast myself. You'll use that mask of, I know how things are, rather than how podcast one went. So I think it's just a building of experience and just adding layers onto that. I
Well,
think
we might be able to test that soon because Alex has been picked up by a South Africa media agency that's got how many viewers, Alex? So you might be getting.
Sorry, yeah, probably close to like 6 million or so. But I'd like to compare it kind of to running, to be honest, because it's like one of those things that when you put your boots on for the first time, it is the most daunting thing. But after you've run again 1 or 2 laps, the the kind of rule of three you were alluding to, Dan, but also just the distance becomes easier. So, there's no real difference between, Dan, if you were on a podcast tomorrow with like, whatever number, because you've kind of already done it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the scale of, I was just thinking as, as that example was played out, I don't think the scale would actually make a difference now. But it would, yeah, that's an assumption, right? I'll check back as we scale up our numbers, but
It's
yeah.
quite funny because I've done a lot of workshops and I've done face-to-face workshop. I've had like numerous number of physical people sitting in a room and I've run a workshop, and I never felt that nervous. But I think subconsciously knowing that this channel reaches out to so many million people, kind of that subconscious, I think I kind of wound myself up, kind of thing. So sometimes it is that thing of people judging, and I don't know, it's just something, maybe it's just self-sabotage thing. Maybe that's what we do. We just kind of wind
You
ourselves
judge
up.
yourself first, yeah. You
Yeah.
judge yourself first.
Yeah, you're not good enough, or kind of that. And then you just think, okay, I need to put this mask on, follow the script, and kind of just deliver, because of the fact that you're not ready yet to be your authentic self in such a huge platform.
Do you think there's another angle to this where you can put on a mask, like almost like as a persona, in order to try and learn something? So let's say, I don't know, I'm just if I want to become more confident, do I forcefully put on a mask of a confident person and actually go and test that in the real world? And then, like on my theory, if you did that 3 or 4 times and you got a positive response from, or the response that you were looking for from other people, like almost like social validation of that particular mask, that you would then find it easier to integrate that mask into your kind of mask arsenal, or kind of, your closet.
It's how I try to be. I grew up being a very extrovert, hyperactive character. And in my adulthood, I actually read about introvert, and I came across this TED talk about introvert. And I thought, I'm going to try and be an introvert. So now today I've got a nice balance. So before I get to a social event, I'll decide. Try to be an observer to hear today, please. Stop talking. Or I'll be like, okay, make sure you interact, but make sure you do the listening more. Because I used to tend to fill the room with talking and laughter and conversations flying from left, right, and center. But now I am more capable of putting that mask on. I'm going to be an introvert. I'm going to be an observer. I'll be the listener. I think how we were just saying in the beginning, if you recognize it, then you can use it to your advantage as a skill.
And how did you find
And I think you have
respondents?
to maintain a balance in your daily tasks and work.
That's interesting. So how you had the ability and the sort of the self-awareness to be able to like switch modes. How did you find people responded to the two versions of you, the introvert and the extrovert? And which did you prefer?
It confuses some people. I've had some people say, "Oh, you're very quiet." Then that pressures me. I'm like, "Oh, shut up! Don't tell me I'm quiet. I'm trying to be quiet." Now I just say it. Now I just say, "Oh, I'm just observing today. I'm just gonna be a bit quiet." Whether they get it or not, that's a secondary thing. If they want to tune in and understand what I'm trying to do, That's fine. I'll tell them because I think what Owen was saying, when you start sharing, well, in my case, when I start sharing, I try to create this platform that you can share this much as well if you wish to. I'm just going to share something about me. And then I came across the term ambivert. So you kind of get exhausted from switching from someone who's naturally very talkative and energetic to being very quiet. Actually, being very quiet takes up a lot of my energy. Being an observer, being very formal takes up a lot of my energy. So recognizing that now I've got a good balance of it. But yeah, people who know me very well will be like, oh, she's being a bit cold. But
And
yeah.
don't you feel like, again, going back to the original question, isn't it exhausting? Like to be this person today and that person
Yeah,
tomorrow?
for me to
and
be
then-
an introvert is very exhausting. Because I'm trying very hard.
But
Yeah.
then it's like how I would describe it is, this is who I am. These are my characteristics. This is how I show up. But at certain points, I'll probably dial it down or dial it up. Like when I'm with my family, I might be a bit louder. When I'm with my colleagues, I might be a bit more humble. But for me personally, changing masks is so exhausting. Like, for
Yeah.
example, what I've realized is when I'm with my colleagues at work, I'm very professional, I'm very respectful. And I like that part of me, because I notice the more respectful I am, the more people are respectful back to me. So now if I was to take that and use it on my kids, because my kids are a bit older now, they're teenagers. So I'm respectful. I treat them like adults, like not I'm the parent, you're the child, adults. And I've noticed this kind of worked really well for me. So now it's not about, okay, I'm going to be an extrovert here and an introvert here, or I'm going to be really polite here and really cold here. It's more like I'm just going to be neutral and build on this one version of me, because it's working everywhere. Like you were saying, it's like this one basketball, but it doesn't have the stripes. It just has this one ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think?
Because I see it as a skill that before it was my observation skill had to be improved. My listening skill had to be improved. So I had to take on that mask, to sit in that mask, to be also observed as someone who's listening or observing. So then I can get what I've intended to get out of the situation. But I think like we were saying, because with that recognition, I'm using it as a skill. So now I can prepare myself, give myself the heads up, so then it's not so exhausting. I think that's how I've kind of like made this little operation. This is the strategy I'll go with, because it's the most comfortable right now for me and close to natural in that sense. I can still get on with people. I can still take part. I can also tone it up. Well, if I've met someone quite interesting, I can tone up. I'll be like, switch off that introvert and put that extrovert question chatterbox on.
I'd like to build on Habiba's point about kind of masculine and feminine masks, and like kind of like maybe unpack those a little bit more and analyze why they are like that way in the first place. And then the second part to it would be, how can we, if we can choose different aspects of different masks and almost try them on for fit, what lessons could we learn from both sets of masks that we could use to enhance ourselves as individuals, as leaders, as creators, as innovators, as problem solvers, whatever.
Do you think it's something to do with social stereotype? Is it the fact that I'm the boss, I'm the leader, now I need to act a bit masculine in order to be respected, in order to fit in order to be listened to? Is it just like a social stereotype that we're trying to kind of honor or kind of carry through? Because in the history of men and women, a woman who acts very vulnerable or very emotional is not taken that seriously as a man who is like together, to kind of firm and kind of like held strong and confidence. So yeah, I'll just put it out there.
I
I'd
feel
like
like
to.
we just label it. Oh, so go on, Owen.
I was just going to say, I do think that there's like some industry bias where, because I mean, one thing I do hear around, not necessarily with the younger generation so much, but like the more mature, older generation, whereby like they say they have an issue with like a woman manager or something. They always make it sound like it's significantly worse than it would be if it was a male manager. And like from my perspective, I don't think that's true at all. I think it's purely to do with how the manager carries themselves and how they are generally. And like, yeah, obviously there's always going to be personality issues if people clash. But I think just because there are, or there have been in the older generations, more male managers and more male owner of businesses, you just get this perception whereby they still think that like say women can't do the job, when in actual fact that's not the case whatsoever. It's just about finding the right person for that position. And it shouldn't matter who you are, it should matter about how you carry yourself and how you are as a manager and how you get on with your team, rather than it being anything to do with where you come from or who you are.
Yeah.
Can
Because
I
sometimes it's just
yes.
sorry, it's just
No,
the
you carry.
skills you need. Like you need a tough manager. We're not saying we need masculine tough or feminine tough. Like what is that anyway? But it's us who put a label on these things. These are masculine stuff, these are feminine stuff. But if you need a tough manager, if you need a logical manager, if you need a strategic manager, you need to find the right person for the fit. And then stereotype sometimes becomes lost in words because of how divided we are, and then we put all those. I mean, it's good to know people, it's good to understand people have different perspective, but we don't need to adopt all those perspective in one basket and then be continuously lost with the topic. Should it be a female or a male or them, in a tough to be a tough manager? No, we just need a tough person.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it generally solely is down to who that person is. And yeah, of course, I think maybe there is some subconscious pressure from the old generation, whereby if a woman does step into a important position, they might be scrutinized more because they're not used to it and they haven't had this, say, 50 years ago, it might not have been like that. So which is, in my eyes, completely wrong. I think it should be, everyone should be equal, and everyone should have equal opportunities, full stop.
Yeah.
But again, it does sort of nail down, you do need that, like, not necessarily putting on like a mask and, like you say, going back to like the femininity or masculinity, and the fact that one of those might suit best in a position. I think it'd be solely down to the fact that, like, you should still be able to be yourself and still be able to have, say, whatever emotions you have, or however soft you are, however harsh you are. But again, just sort of rolling back into the part where, like, your team are going to take sort of notes from your behavior as a manager or an owner, and that's going to feed down, and that can entirely affect the business top to bottom. So, like, improving a culture whereby, even if, say, you did need to put a mask on, having a mask which not necessarily suits a business, but is enough of yourself, so it's not like a lie and it's not like a purely fake position to be in. And I understand the point that maybe sometimes, like going back to Dan's comment before about how testing a mask, like having it like a real world scenario where you almost like pretend to be more confident. I mean, in some cases, like literally actors do that for a living. So maybe sometimes it can be good, and depending on like maybe your internal feelings, say you have let's say you have like an anger problem, but you figure out a way to manage that internally by acting a certain way, whereby that's not seen in the workplace, even though internally you could be feeling it, but you manage to overdrive the feeling and instead portray yourself in a completely different manner. And internally that could be really beneficial, but at the same time, it's like that's not necessarily how you are feeling underneath. And I'm not saying that you should get really angry at your staff, but if you if you're feeling something, it should be strategically known rather than sort of emotionally known.
The scenario
Yeah,
that always
we shouldn't
works where
fully
people,
mask
sorry,
ourselves.
okay.
Go on, sorry, go
I
on.
was gonna say the scenario that always works for that, what Owen just described there, is in a moment of crisis and self-defense. Now, walking home, drunk person tries to attack you, and in that moment you're obviously completely freaking out and fearful. But if you put on a show of confidence, that mask that you choose to adopt in order to try and make it seem as if you're in control of that situation might just be the thing that gets you out of it, and your vulnerability might only encourage the attacker to carry on and mug you or do whatever they're going to do. But so I think that from listening to podcasts and things about that always seems like a really good scenario to use for people to justify being false.
I wanted to add on to Dan's question, and I think post it to Habiba if it's okay, is you mentioned how obviously in the workplace environment you're feminine, whether you're masculine or feminine, etc. Now, obviously you're a leader yourself, and I think from experience, what I've seen is if a male manager or someone in leadership role becomes emotional, no one says, "Oh, that's a very feminine side," because he's a man. He's just showing his emotion. Whereas if a female was to do the same act or react, they'd say, "Oh, she's just acting like that because she's a woman or whatever." So, how do you, as a leader, react in that situation? Do you continue with the mask that you had on, or do you flip it a little bit? Like, how is your reaction as a leader in your role, in your professional side, and in your business?
I think as a leader, it's just, to me personally, it's just easier to be authentic me. So yes, if there is a situation where I am stressed and or I am a bit emotional, how I kind of unpick this is the relationships that I've built with my team. So when when I have this relationship with my teams, they know me as me. So they don't know me as a Habiba, the masculine person, a Habiba, the emotional person. They just know me as Habiba. So if they know me and my characteristics and how I deliver, how I interact with people. So when I'm having a bad day or a stressful day, I'm in this sense of they as a team kind of understand that I'm coming. This is not just me being a woman, or it's just me having a moment. And then it's not like carried through the whole of my career with my team that, do you know what, that she's such an emotional person. No, I'm having a moment and they kind of understand it and they pick it up. But there is this bit, I would say personally, I do is I think I'm just, as a leader, I'm a bit harsh on myself. So certain things I won't just kind of openly kind of be emotional about, openly be frustrated about, and how I discipline myself that there's a time and a place for a certain reaction. So maybe in front of my team in a boardroom, maybe this is not the time to get really, really annoyed. Maybe this is the time in front of my team I need to kind of hold it together, think of a solution to the problem, and work together with the team and find a solution. And maybe later on, when I'm by myself, I'm like having my head in my hand and I'm really upset. But that's what it is. It's like picking your time and your place to kind of when you kind of switch off and when you hold it together, if that makes sense.
Sorry to be the timekeeper, but this conversation's absolutely flown by. We've only got 4 minutes left, so I guess we should start wrapping it up. But it's been it's been a very thought-provoking conversation. I just wanted to kind of maybe use the last time as well. We've been looking at this very much from an internal perspective, and obviously leadership is a huge part of this this conversation and the reason we have these gatherings. I mean, we've spoken, Sabir has obviously really highlighted nicely that it's a skill. But there's also a skill as a leader in being able to spot when people are putting on different masks within your team, and it comes back to a point earlier about working all hours of the day and then going home and feeling miserable. Now, as a leader, if you could prevent some of that by having I think, an equal and opposite skill of being able to recognize masks and help people get comfortable taking their mask off, maybe we could use the last few minutes to discuss yeah, how we have some of these self-awareness points in ourselves that benefit others.
I mean, could we say that if we go back to the core of being a skill, if you want to know, if you believe that it's a skill and you know how certain masks you create, it's one of those attributes I feel like you could see in others. So if you know that, oh, I know this mask, I've put it on
Or you
recently.
can assume strongly,
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like if
Maybe we
if
don't
you
have
know
to
the skill
investigate.
set, then if a colleague is showing a specific mask on a day, you would know they're putting a mask on. And I think that's when you can have a sit down with, especially from a leadership point of view, and say to X, Y, and Z, I've been where you are. You don't need to do these acts, or you don't need to act and say, well, be, or you know, whatever the issue is at the time, or whatever you think it is an issue. And I think that's why, if you see as a skill set, then when you do see in your realm as a leader, then you can implement with your experience. And generally speaking, that person probably doesn't know, but they actually need you to tell you that, you know what, it's okay to have this, but let's utilize this mask in a different way rather than using it negatively. So rather than seeing it as something that's pulling them back, use it for their advantage and the business and, you know, the organization. I think, to go back to the root, I think if you have the skill, it's a skill to understand it, and it's an even better skill to apply to others, or let them get in, you know, let them understand that it is a skill to have.
Or being mindful that other people in the
Yeah.
space could be doing the same. So you kind of have to, as a leader in the leadership team, you kind of have to be all that should be also in your task.
Yep.
You know, what am I keeping up? Am I being mindful of people's well-being? Am I being mindful of people's operation or self-operation? This person usually does this. This week they seem to be doing it backwards. Those are leadership skills to have a track of your, you know, of your employees and your team.
So
And
would you say,
whether you recognize it or not in individuals, you should be mindful everyone's probably doing it.
so that mindful bit that you're saying, Tara, how I see it is going back to relationships. As a leader, are you building those relationships with your team that you can pick up, you can advise, and you can support? So all of that goes back to your efforts of building that relationship, because like Sabir said,
subliminal messages. Is everyone having an apple today? You know, just something to boost everyone, that, you know what, keep well, come and speak to me. There is a door to the right where you can go and speak to someone. If you don't need to, that's fine, but just be mindful. It's what you create in the environment.
the environment you create.
Yeah.
Incredible, incredible. Well, that's time, unfortunately, and thank you so much. If anyone's got any burning questions or follow-ups or connections to be made from the audience, please just do it. And if you need any help between either Habiba or I or Alex, we can do that for you. One thing I would like to challenge. So again, coming back to Sabir's point, I reckon our challenge should be, how do we write all this up so that we could put it on a CV? Because it sounds like it's a really useful skill to be able to talk about, not only be aware of it for yourself, but also, you know, your self-awareness can be then leveraged to benefit others, whether they're directly in your team or just in your immediate surroundings. I think that's an incredibly powerful thing, and we shouldn't be afraid to call it out as a skill. So I would challenge us all to go away and be able to write that, and maybe we can follow up with some suggestions on
And I'll say,
LinkedIn.
if you were to find a solution, please do email me, and I'll be sure to add that to my CV and potentially write a thesis on it. But yeah, no, I think that's a challenge I think we should all take in. I think it's a brilliant idea. Whether we can accomplish it or not, but at least it's something to do over the next few weeks and months.
To work on, yeah.
Amazing. Thank
Awesome.
you all, and
Thank
thank you,
you.
Habiba,
so
for
much.
co-hosting.
Thank you very
It was a
much.
pleasure.